We're watching is about the history of propellant and projectile devices. This is being vague on purpose because I'm going to be pointing out some really simple thing, but some basic ideas. On the speed rating in open air when gunpowder is lit, it's very fast burn. It seems cleaner than some of the other propellants. It provides slower firing speed, which seems counterintuitive. And that in flintlock flash pans and caplock guns, they need a very sensitive, finely granulated powder, and this works best for them. Next, substitute powders, black powder substitute or gunpowder substitutes like pyrodex powder and pyrodex pellets, which are another subject, have a faster burn rate. They produce more caustic, corrosive, and dirty leftover material and debris, and are less sensitive and less dense. They can fire faster speed shots, and they are more energetic total energy output per unit of mass, and contain additives like graphite and potassium percolate. But they need a greater degree of confinement to ensure that the burn is complete, to generate pressure and the strong ignition required for inline muzzle loaders that use shotgun primers and or primer caps. Primer caps, you might want to, I will also have a link to Berdan versus Boxer primers, are based on the idea that there's a metal cap, it's just literally a cap, made out of, contains primer material. It can be all sorts of material. And on impact, it's usually impacting in the past with a very narrow piece of tubing, and that would act as essentially an anvil to be struck against by the hammer, as the analogy goes. For the hammer hitting a cap, and that's on a cap lock muzzle loader on the upper left there, and it impacts on an object called the nipple, which acts as, keep your jokes to yourself, which acts as an anvil for the impacting hammer. Now, modern primers, including shotgun primers and pistol primers, sometimes have an integrated anvil in them. And when they don't, it uses a primer cap that's the same thing as was used in these 1800s style cap and ball rifles and cap and shotguns. Next, later on, much later, 1985 and such, a simple idea of putting the mechanism for a normal gun together to fire a firing pin into either a cap or a shotgun primer, which in and of itself has the anvil and primer material and metal casings around it, was incorporated in the same idea, but it still included a screw-in nipple or breech plug. And I'm going to make a comparison between the two of them, but one of the advances at the time was to use pelletized propellant, pelletized gunpowder, or pyrodex, and it would be put down the barrel, and it has a hollow in it, and you can see on the lower right there that the firing of it would cause ignition in all three, or all two usually, pyrodex pellets to drive your bullet, sabeted or not, or shot cup for shotgun, out of the barrel, and that would be how it would fire. Anyway, the next part of this is pretty simple. The newer pyrodex materials and modern fake gunpowder propellants don't require a license to buy or sell, or buy or store or ship. They're a lot like smokeless powder. Smokeless powder is modern propellant, and this is a modernized version of it. But again, it produces more fouling in the barrel for various reasons, and gunpowder might be a lot less problematic. However, smokeless powder, and the reason we use it, is the lowest burn rate, and it burns by deflagration. It does not want to burn by detonation, although it can, obviously. That's in open air. When it's contained, it will explode, and it will produce propelling effect. So if you don't keep it in a container that's tightly packed or really constrictive, it tends to be a lot safer. So it gets shipped real easily. You can buy it without a license, You can use it without a license. You don't have to treat it as an explosive necessarily. Just like the powder, like the muzzleloader gunpowder replacement that usually just has a couple of additives. And normally, smokeless powder, the reason it's called this, is produces mostly gaseous combustion products that are less caustic or non-caustic or non-corrosive in general. Many people operate modern rifles and pistols and shotguns without cleaning them for months or even years sometimes, and they can get away with it. It's a bad idea, but you can do it. On the other hand, with modern pyrodex fake gunpowder and gunpowder, you had to clean these things. And in some cases, it was a good idea to clean them between each shot. Now, I'm going to bring everybody's attention to the idea of what a cartridge is versus these muzzle loaders. Now, to explain the process for reloading a cartridge consists of a primer or a cap on top of an anvil built into the casing, and in that casing is a hole through which the spark travels. Very similar to the cap over the nipple with the tube in it, and this hole, the touch hole, then leads to the propellant, in this case gunpowder. In a modern shell, it's almost identical. And then there's a sabeted bullet or a wad or packing material or whatever, and that's it. Now that goes for shotgun shells and cartridges for pistols. So you could, by analogy, decide that a muzzle loader, whether it's a modern or older one, because they have almost the same parts. I'm not talking flintlocks here, but we can do this pretty easily. Basically, this is a firing mechanism attached to a integrated barrel shotgun shell or rifle cartridge. You could treat this in that way. Now that gives you an idea of why modern weapons that can have a cartridge are very different, because you're essentially, every time you fire the gun, you're replacing about half of the equipment that's involved in doing the procedure of propelling a bullet. All right? Okay. I also like to point out that caplocks and inline strikers like this are all much more simple than you would find in a shotgun or any pistol, because they don't have to be very complicated. But then again, you have to reload them. Now, hand loading is the activity or hobby of making your own cartridges or shotgun shells by manually loading them. And in case you weren't aware of it, just like a muzzle loader's barrel, you put a primer cap in, then you pour gunpowder into the opening that the bullet comes out of, or the shot or whatever comes out, or slug, and then you do whatever you have to make sure it'll work properly with the next thing, and then you put in bullet or pellets. So yeah, the reloader, a person reloading a pistol ammunition or rifle or shotgun ammunition, is essentially doing the same thing as a muzzleloader had to do in the past when the cap and ball system came out in the 1800s. The only major improvement, well, there were many, but the major improvement was to put it inline and being able to modify these things to be able to use something simple like a cap or even a shotgun primer or primers out of pistol ammunition, which was available at the time now. I also like to point out that hammer and nipple are then replacements, by the way, for the original flintlock and the flash pan. But that's another story. Okay? Okay. This is going to be included in the image here below. It's a cross-reference sheet I've shown before for primers for 50 caliber BMG, large and small pistols, and large and small rifle, as well as shotgun primers over on the upper left there. And also the dimensions used for them and how similar they are to, of all things, pellet guns and literally 22 caliber bullets. Not exactly the same, but they get pretty similar. And then there's the 50 BMG that is about the same diameter, according to this, as a 30 caliber bullet or something. So anyway, percussion cap primers. Now there's all sorts of styles, but they basically look kind of the same. They can have all sorts of extra stuff on them. And the dimensions there are listed as being 0.166 inches inner diameter for the pocket inside of it. And that's a lot like the diameter, exterior diameter of small pistol primers. And they go all the way down to 0.15 inches or 0.16 inches. So they hover around that size. Somebody went to a lot of trouble getting that information and then photo bucket ruined it. On shotgun primers, they're called 209s because in most cases, they hover around a number that's supposed to be a standard that's supposed to be 0.209 inches. But the variations for, let's say, the diameter at the base near its, we don't want to call it a rim because that implies it's like a bullet, all the way to its point or opening or whatever, have a variation that's very wide-ranging from 0.245 to 0.236 for one of them, and 0.40 down to up to 0.44. So there's a large amount of variation between the front and back of them, but they do hover around 0.244. That is the actual hover point. But like, for instance, on the Winchester ones, for the how much tapering it has, it can be 0.263 inches. Now, why am I doing this? This is actually supposed to have been what I collected before, but it's very difficult to get anybody who did measurements of percussion cap primers. Now, please also notice that percussion cap primers are based on the same cap that was used on the caplock and can also be used in modern inline muzzle loaders. But also, that cap is where you get the name cap gun. Yeah, because inside of it is a little circle about 0.16 to 0.17 inches in diameter, otherwise known as the diameter of a pellet gun pellet, that is used for cap guns that use paper tape. By the way, some original cap and ball revolvers used a tape that is exactly the same. It was just made out of metal. That's where that came from. And the obvious percussion cap primers, if you put 6 of them in a little row with a little red plastic between them, that's literally the little cap gun caps you had when you were a kid that were the same size and shape. These are repurposed components for arming a real gun. Now, why am I bringing this up? I want to point out that the pyrodex pellets, if you have any experience with toy or model rocketry, have almost the same characteristics as a model rocket engine. It looks like somebody took a model rocket engine design and put together a propellant for a bullet rather than a toy rocket. And yes, they are used, by the way, very, very not coincidentally, as discharge components for popping out the little parachute on top of some toy rockets. Okay, now I want to point out something here. The design of this here is that it hits the primer first, then it fires a spark into the powder, and then that powder propels the bullet. Now that's very logical, but somebody decided to think outside of the box at one point and do something really interesting. They made a bullet, the projectile, and they integrated a pocket to put in a primer backwards. Yeah, and then they made a powder charge that you could either push a pin through or make it hollow, just like these pyrodex pellets over here that you can look up. And a pin would come out of the gun. It's called a needle gun, by the way. And it would impact the back of the bullet and impact not just the back of the bullet, but hit the primer, which would then explode not from behind, but from the bullet backwards, causing the powder to burn off from here and then burn backwards towards the firing pin, which was left in place. That would cause the bullet to fly outward under air pressure, not damaging the pin, and leave literally nothing left in the barrel, and the propulsion would usually push the primer cap, the cap or primer out of the barrel as well, making it the first caseless ammunition that was used in the Prussian War. So caseless ammunition is not a new idea. And by doing that, it made it to where you'd put in what looked like a modern day cartridge. It's just that the back end of it was kind of granular looking. That was the gunpowder. Or it would have a paper bag, and you'd fire it, and when you open it up the breech, nothing came out because every single part of what you put into the gun came out of it, and with devastating effect to your opponent. So that's for the video for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good luck with that, and bye.